Welcome to another exciting episode of bringing Jesus back into focus, because he's made very blurry because of the old Jewish Testament religion that's been overlaid on top of him and the divine loving spiritual creator of pure love by saying that Yahweh, the two-headed God of the Jews, a God of war, brutal, revengeful, murdering, genocidal maniac, Yahweh 1, and a God of love, Yahweh 2, love your neighbour as yourself, two completely different gods in the Jewish religion. It is not monotheistic, it is dualistic. Jesus comes into the monotheistic understanding of only love. Buddha also had the same clear light experience as Jesus did, the clear light mind experience, where you clean out the inside of the cup, as Jesus would say, or Buddha would say, you clean out the negativities from your mind. They both understood that it's about this clear light mind of you within yourself that you have yet to discover, most likely, particularly if you're in the war-mongering soldier satanic armies at the moment, murdering and killing other children of the divine loving spiritual creator. Well, you've got no idea who you are. You're just a dark, filthy, stinking shadow figure. So, that being said, I had to write about the slander because I was a Jewish Christian Catholic. I was born into that Jewish Christian dualistic faith of the Catholic Church. I left when I was 16 because, of course, they were teaching this lie that there's only one God in the whole Bible, and Yahweh is the same divine source of inspirational love that Jesus was at one with, and that's a lie. And the book of Revelation, Jesus is coming on the clouds, that's a lie. So I left. But I took Jesus with me because I loved his words. So I'm very blessed. So I had to write two books about what has gone wrong. Why are they slandering him? In the last 5 years, I went back and had a look at it. And so I had to write some books because they're just still slandering him all over the place. So the Gospels of Jesus Unplugged is published around the world, and you'll find that's a much clearer translation of the Gospels. Instead of God the Father, I say loving spiritual creator. The Jewish overlays are taken out. There's no apocalyptic stuff in it. It's better translated from the Greek interlinears so that you have a better understanding of his true sayings. The teachings of Jesus Unplugged hopefully will be published in the first week of 2026, and that's the more powerful book, which we're going to read from chapter 10 right now in a moment. Oh, pardon me, I've got a minor neurotoxic fungal infection growing in my lung. Poisons the brain to death, but luckily it's only the physical body that dies, not your spiritual body. The spiritual teachings of Jesus are a universal calling to all human children on earth to awaken into our spiritual body and true identity of love and non-violence before our dualistic body and mind of the flesh dies and returns to the earth. Only our spiritual body and soul live on. We must prevent the dualistic mind of our earthly body of flesh from controlling us and become at one with our spiritual mind, filled only with the loving life force of our loving spiritual creator. Then our two bodies, one made of the earth and one formed of spirit, can be in harmony and at one in purpose to bring the spiritual love and peace of heaven to earth for all children. Only true spiritual children of light and love can enter the heavenly spiritual world. All those children divided within themselves between love and hatred cannot enter. The words of Jesus can awaken and transform us. So that's the book we'll be reading from chapter 10. We're up to chapter 10, and it's about the two-headed God of the Jews and the singularity of divine loving creator that Jesus is one with. A very important chapter to clearly just show you that the Jewish religion is not monotheistic, it's a lie. And I wish the Jewish Christian churches would stop saying that. I mean, it's one thing that the Jews, if they want to believe that lie, that's their business. That's their problem. That's their schizophrenic problem. But it's not what Jesus taught. And that's what I get angry about. I never bothered about it because I'd never believed that rubbish. His love and non-violence, the divine source he comes from is love and non-violence. The world where you go to, if you want to go there, is love and non-violence. Guess how you go to a world of love and non-violence? Have a guess. You have to become love and non-violence. It's pretty simple. This is the daily prayer to center yourself into your spiritual body. Because remember, Jesus taught right now, you've got two bodies with you. If you're watching this, there's your spiritual body and your physical body. Your physical eyes and brain and eyeballs, all this biological, material, earthly stuff biological organism. It's allowing you to hear my voice, the sound waves. It's all material. It's all material. Your brain's all material, everything. But your spiritual body can hear this, see this, read this through your physical body. You're like a spiritual rider on a horse, water in a vase. So everything the vase experiences, you experience, your spiritual body. So this is the prayer I use to, you might say, become the water in the vase. Or as Jesus talked about the living water that you have to receive. So you have to become your spiritual body, and you've got to think about it. You've just got a spiritual body, and when you're going to die, and you will, of course, your body will, and you pass through the death experience, it could be extremely painful. It may be totally agonizing. But once it's over, you're cut off from all those experiences of pain. It's finished. And then your spiritual body is clear and free of all pain and suffering. And your spirit, your mind, you yourself, if you've lived a good life of love and haven't hurt anyone, you won't suffer anymore. And your spiritual body will come into the presence of the source of our spiritual life. And that source is perfect love. It's a mind or consciousness or a being of pure love. And I say she's created our spiritual body for us. So I've got to come into her presence. Am I covered in the murdering filth of all the warmongers at the moment in the world, the stinking, rotten filth? Do I come into the presence of this beautiful being stinking, of just covered myself in dog manure, which is Netanyahu, the Israeli army, Putin, the Russian army, Hamas? They're all covered in dog droppings. Smear it all over them. They think, oh, I smell so lovely. I'm covered in dog droppings. How powerful am I? Coming into the presence of the divine loving one, that's actually the stench that comes off them. They don't even know this. They're so ignorant, so pathetic. We have to pray for them. You can't kill them. I'm a pacifist Christian. I just have to warn them. You're heading for hell. So this is the daily prayer that I try to stay centered in my spiritual body so I don't do the things that these evil satanic children are doing in the world. They're all satanic, false identities. This is the prayer. Now I use the female aspect. I think of this divine being as she. The word she is both the male word he and the female she in the one word. So it works really well. Plus, you've got to cut yourself off from Yahweh, the male figurehead of the Jewish religion. Jesus said God the Father, but he had to say that. If he said God the Mother, they would have stoned him to death. So he couldn't use the female form, but he never said Yahweh. Never. He couldn't, because he would have been saying, this two-headed God is who I am inspired from, and that would be incorrect. He couldn't say Yahweh. That's why he condemned the war god. Anyway, this is the prayer. I ramble on a bit, don't I? As I rest upon this earth, the Holy One, she will give birth to who I really am, awakening me from clay and sand, a spiritual child of the divine, with only her love that fills my mind. To every creature I will be kind in every single land, for this is truly who I am, a spiritual child of the loving spiritual creator in the heavenly spiritual world, born out of the earth to bring her love to children in need and help guide them home to heaven as she's guided me, through the spiritual way and teachings that Jesus gave us to be just as he, a spiritual child of love on earth. That prayer brings me into my spiritual body that will leave my physical body when it drops dead. I have to be in this body, this spiritual body, when I leave. It has to be clean. That means my physical body has to express only love. I can stand up strongly against evil and call it out. There's no problem about that. But we don't become like them. We don't pick up the gun like them. We try to bring them out of their own stinking evil. So it's being a pacifist, you're vulnerable in the physical world, but you're safe in heaven. Being a violent, murdering piece of filth in this world, you're in big trouble because you can't get into heaven. Heaven's eternal. This is just a little tiny short time, and everyone's physical body, everyone's dies. Putin, Netanyahu, Hamas, Adolf Hitler, whoever the latest killing satanic murderers are, they're just going to grow old and drop dead. And that's when they realise how stinking evil they really have been. Whereas if you're just a child of love and you lived out of your spiritual body and identity, you'll be safe. You'll be in a world embraced by apparently an extraordinary love, and there'll be other children there, other living spiritual beings who are only filled with love, living out of their spiritual bodies of love. No evil can come there. It's impossible. It can't enter because it's not love, you see. It's just automatic. So I use this prayer to make sure I remember I have to forgive those who hurt me and all the rest of it, all the things that Jesus talked about. It's a nice prayer. The Spirit logo, Earth logo, that's my logo for the Christian community I wish to establish on Earth. And it involves just me. That's my community there, me. But there's the cross and the dove, you see, the earth and the spirit, the two bodies of Jesus in the one circle. We've got two bodies in the one body, the water and the vase. His body on the cross of flesh died, bled to death, or it didn't bleed to death. You're asphyxiated because of the way your body's hanging and you can't breathe anymore, and the massive stress and the beatings he'd already had and the whippings. He was just, his whole body was just wrecked and exhausted, and his heart gave out. Well, his body of flesh died, and it didn't rise from the dead. He flew away in his spiritual body. That's the dove. He said to the other guy on the cross next to him, he said, "This day you'll be with me in the heavenly spiritual world." This day. So I believe what he said. I don't believe the rubbish that he died 3 days later. I mean, he rose 3 days later. That's completely unnecessary, but there's a reason why that was put in, and I explain it in the book. The disciples had to cover up what really happened because the Jews weren't ready to hear the truth. They still aren't. Okay then, so now we've got the two different gods, a very important chapter, because this explains to Jewish Christians in particular who are being fooled and conned and lied to that Yahweh is the same God as Jesus. You'll see here in this chapter, clearly it is not. Nearly all religions at the time of Jesus had different gods to pray to for different aspects of their lives, but they gave each one a distinct name and temple to worship them. They rarely called their powerful gods of war and murder by the same name as their gods of peace and love. They understood they are opposite powers, and it would weaken their power and be illogical to say these very different natures are from one divine being. But the Jews have always worshipped two opposing gods of war and love, calling them by the same name, Yahweh. The Jewish God Yahweh is not a monotheistic God. It does have a monotheistic body called Yahweh, but has two opposing Godheads on it, making it a dualistic religion, not a monotheistic religion. One brutal, murdering, thieving Godhead of war and revenge, Yahweh one, and the Godhead of love and peace, Yahweh two, on one body. This is not the loving Creator of Jesus. Jesus only acknowledges the Godhead of love and peace and cuts the Godhead of war off the body of Yahweh. The loving spiritual creator that Jesus was an awakened spiritual child of is truly monotheistic, as her entire being is only empowered by her loving spiritual life force. True Christians only acknowledge her as our source of spiritual life, not Yahweh. The Romans had 12 primary deities, and two of these were the god of war called Mars and a god of peace called Pax. They had their own separate dedicated temples and ceremonies attached to their worship. The Jews also worshipped two opposing gods of war and peace, just like the Romans and Greeks and others, but came up with a devious way of worshipping both opposing gods at the same time, by calling them by the same name Yahweh, and placing them both in the same temple. The Yahweh one war god. The Roman war god Mars was worshipped and prayed to in his temple, and animal sacrifices of bulls, pigs and rams were made to Mars to gain the blessing of Mars for the military and bring success in wars. The animals were then eaten after offering some of the dead body of the murdered animal to Mars. There's the Romans, the way they prayed and sacrificed animals to their war god. Now let's read on. The Jewish priests and the one making the offering to their Yahweh one god of war also sacrificed an innocent animal to their God, war God Yahweh One, to help gain his blessing for their soldiers and bring success to kill in war, and also ate some of the meat of the sacrificial animal. It's the exact same ceremony. Roman soldiers often gathered at the temple to receive a blessing from Mars and the priests of the war god Mars before going into battle to murder other children. Soldiers would swear an oath to the Godhead of war Mars. Emperor Augustus built a temple dedicated to him as Mars, the avenging god of the Romans. Deuteronomy 21:4 in the Jewish religion. The Jews also had a spiritual leader called the Mesuka Milkana, I think it is, especially anointed to bless the Jewish soldiers for war and killing other children. He would say, when you go to battle against your enemies and see horses and chariots and people more numerous than yourselves, do not be afraid of them, for the Lord your God, Yahweh One, war god of death, is with you. Yahweh One, the avenging Jewish Godhead of war, is the same brutal, murdering god of war as the Roman avenging god of war Mars, the Egyptian war god Sekhmet, and the Greek god of war Ares. The Jews had the same type of rituals before going to war to kill other children as the Romans and others, and worshipped the same god under a different name. This Yahweh war god has nothing whatsoever to do with Jesus and our loving spiritual creator. Revenge is a big part of the two-headed Yahweh instead of forgiveness, as Jesus explained concerning our true spiritual source of life. The Yahweh One, war god of revenge. Yahweh One, Godhead of war. 1 Samuel 15, 1-3. Then Samuel said to Saul, the Lord, Yahweh One, sent me to anoint you king over his people Israel. Now listen to the words of the Lord, Yahweh One, God of war and death. This says the Lord of war and death, of hosts. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did in opposing the Israelites when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. So Saul obeyed the God of war, Yahweh One, and defeated the Amalekites. He captured Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. The Jewish Christian churches say, oh, Jesus and the God of Jesus, that's who that is. What a load of rubbish. This describes the brutal, merciless, avenging God of war, Yahweh One of the Jews, who even murders infants, like all war god followers are inspired to do. This is the exact same war god of other religions of the time. All war gods are satanic. Why do you think Jesus said you're worshipping your children of Satan? That's why he told them that. Book of Nahum, Yahweh One, God of war. Here's another example of it. There's plenty of examples. I've just picked out a few of their war god. Here's another selection describing the brutal, avenging God of war, Yahweh One, worshipped and followed by the Jews in the Book of Nahum in the Old Wine Testament of the Jewish religion. This refers to the Jews destroying the city of Nineveh, and murdering the occupants and plundering the city. A jealous and avenging God is the Lord. The Lord, God of war and death, is avenging and wrathful. The Lord takes vengeance on his adversaries and reserves anger for his enemies. Jesus said, if someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other cheek to him also. Love your enemies, for our loving Creator is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. So do likewise and be spiritual children of your loving Creator in heaven. Can you see the difference? I just drop these in occasionally, just so you can see the stark black and white difference. Who can endure the burning of his anger? His anger is poured out like fire. Another common reference to fire being poured out from a war god. He will pursue his enemies into darkness. Jesus and our loving Creator bring you out of darkness. I am against you, declares the Lord Yahweh One, war God. Jesus and our loving Creator are always for you, especially if you have fallen into sin. I will throw filth on you and make you vile and set you up as a spectacle to others who sin against me. Jesus and our loving Creator do not throw filth on us or make us vile for our wrongdoings, but help us wash ourselves clean through offering us their spiritual life-giving waters and unending support and love that Jesus teaches about. I will burn up your chariots, and a sword will devour your young and cut you down. Many will be slain. A mass of corpses and countless dead bodies will be all that is left. I will restore the splendor of Jacob like the splendor of Israel. Jesus said, I have not come to condemn, but to save. For I can only do what our loving Creator herself does and shows me to do also. Now that's a dialogue from their religion. Now that's in the Jewish Christian religion too. This is literally worshipping a satanic god in the Christian churches. Because they say, oh yeah, that's the God of Jesus, this satanic war god. Yeah, that's him, yeah. That's her. That's disgraceful. If the Jews want to worship this war god, that's their problem. No Jewish Christian church, no Christian church should teach this. It's disgusting. It's disgraceful. Pope Leo and all the others, they know this is a lie. They know Jesus has got nothing to do with this, but they still say, oh no, for 1700 years we've been lying, so we're going to keep lying to you. The above is an example of the Old Testament rantings of the Yahweh one Godhead of war and death of Israel and all who follow it. Again, we see the violent, vicious, unforgiving anger of the murdering Jewish war god, murdering even the innocent young ones. Only a God of war and death does this, and it is only perpetrated by the children of darkness and death who worship such a perverse, violent God and become beasts of the flesh, devoid of spiritual life and love. The Greeks also worshipped a god of war called Ares and a god of peace, Irene. They had separate temples dedicated to them, and sacrifices were made to them for success in war or peace. Ares was praised as being a war god for his qualities of being violent, aggressive, insatiable in battle, filled with bloodlust and sheer brutality, enjoying manslaughter, just like Yahweh one, the war god. The Jews worshipped a war god and still do. Christians should have nothing to do with this religion. There's no need to. Stick it on the shelf. There's some love in it. I'll talk about that in a minute. There's a loving Yahweh there, but this is a dominant war god. War God Yahweh 1, Deuteronomy 20:10. When you approach a city to fight against it, you shall offer it your terms of peace. If it agrees to your terms and opens to you, then all the people who are found in it shall become your forced slaves to serve you. However, if it rejects your terms of slavery and defends itself against your attack, you shall besiege it. And when the Lord your God, Yahweh one of war and death, gives it into your hands, you shall murder all the men in it with the edge of the sword. Only the women and the children and the animals and all that is in the city, all its spoils, you shall take as booty for yourself, and you shall use the spoil of your enemies that you have stolen with the Lord your God of war and death, which the Lord your God of war and death has given you. This you shall do to all the cities that are far from you, which are not the nearby nations. Only in these cities that the Lord your God of war and death is giving you as an inheritance, you shall kill and murder everything that breathes and leave nothing alive. You shall utterly destroy them, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Canaanite, and the Pezerite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite, as the Lord your God of Yahweh one and death has commanded you. Now the Jews believe this war god. They still believe it today. The Zionists on the West Bank are saying, this Yahweh stinking war god is going to give us Palestine. It's going to give us the West Bank and the Gaza. So their war god doesn't give it to them. They do what they did here. They go and murder the Palestinians on the West Bank and steal their land. That's what they're doing today because of this stinking, filthy war god. The slaughter at Jericho. Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, are you for us or for our enemies? Jesus said, he who lives by the sword shall perish by the sword. Put your sword back into its place. Neither, he replied, but as commander of the army of the Lord, the war god, I have now come. Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, what message does my Lord, Yahweh, the war god of the Jews, have for his servant? Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. Understandably, the people of Jericho were frightened of the marauding, murdering, thieving Jews. Then the messenger of Yahweh one war god said to Joshua, see, I will deliver Jericho into your hands along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men, children of the war god, Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. Jewish spiritual priests and the ark lead the way to war, murder and death. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up, everyone straight in. The divine loving Creator and Jesus take no part in such evil acts and give no power to them. Only a war god of death would gladly give power to such evil actions of those who have become murdering, thieving beasts of the flesh. Joshua called the priests and said to them, "Take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord, the war god, and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it." And he ordered the army, "Advance, march around the city with an armed guard, going ahead of the ark of the Lord." On the 7th day they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times, in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." When someone gives you something as a gift, you do not have to murder children to receive it. Cities, this is all rubbish. They just bashed through the gates. This is all rubbish. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who were with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Joshua tells his murdering Jewish army to not steal any of the treasures for themselves, as they all belong to the war god Yahweh. Yahweh one. And must be taken back and placed in the war god's temple. Otherwise you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. Their war god will punish them if they don't take all the silver and gold and stuff back to his temple. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord, war god, and must go into his treasury. Jesus said, "You cannot serve Mammon and God. My temple," says the divine loving Creator, "shall be called a spiritual house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of thieves." This is quite a stunning and deadly accurate statement by Jesus, revealing the temple was now dedicated to the false two-headed god of the Jews, because the gold, silver and mammon, etc., they were taking back to honour their war god by placing them in his temple, have all been stolen from the children of Jericho by the thieving Jews after murdering them. Jesus understood what they were doing was evil. Murdering, killing, stealing land, stealing gold from other people, other children. That's why he said this. It's beautiful, but he had to be careful, you see. He couldn't talk openly about Yahweh one being a murdering war god, false god, because they'd stone him to death straight away. That's what the children of the war god do if you do any sort of criticism of them. I mean, Adolf Hitler kills you if you criticise him. Putin kills you if you criticise him. They're war gods. These little kiddies are war gods. The Jews worship this mythical war god. They do the killing. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep and donkeys. They broke through the walls by force, not a magical power, and mercilessly murdered every single person and even innocent little children of the divine loving Creator and all of their livestock. Just the sort of worship a war god of death desires. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it, but they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house, the war god Yahweh. So the Lord, the violent murdering Yahweh one God of war, was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land of men, while in heaven his infamy spread. Can you see how evil this is? Can you see how all the Jewish Christian churches are saying, "Oh yeah, that's the God of Jesus"? Can you understand how this is just filthy, stinking slander to say that? If the Jews want to believe this rubbish, that's their problem. Their rabbis need to cut all this stuff out of their religion. I mean, that's what Jesus did. He was a Jew. He got rid of it. Only a God of war could consider such stolen material treasures as something to honour a war god's temple with. The divine loving Creator only receives offerings of spiritual love that we must create with our own precious life she gives us by loving other children. This is how we honour and thank her for the gift of our spiritual life, our spiritual body and soul, while here temporarily on earth. Followers of Jesus are only children of love and life, not death and war. I challenged a number of Judeo-Christians from different denominations to explain to me how they can believe this violent God at Jericho and elsewhere is the exact same divine, loving, spiritual creator of Jesus. Here are a few of their answers. 1. Maybe God had to destroy them all because they were going to interfere with Jesus being born. Obviously, this person feels it is fine to kill in the name of Jesus before he is even born. I mean, just totally, nonsensical. Maybe all those people were evil, so God had to kill them all, even the innocent little children and animals. Doesn't make sense. Number 3, it has always puzzled me how the God of Jesus could do that, but he must have had a reason. Refusal to think for yourself by basing your understanding on blind acceptance of the lies you have been told, while avoiding the obvious contradiction of the loving teachings and spiritual way of Jesus, is no real way to honour Jesus at all. That's just, ridiculous. All of these children were indoctrinated into believing there is only one God in the whole Bible by faulty teachings. Interestingly, all these Judeo-Christians loved studying the Old Testament Jewish religion, the two-headed God of the Jews, and the book of Revelation. And there you have it, the trap. They prefer the old wine to the new, and so do not have a full and correct understanding of who our loving spiritual creator really is, as taught by Jesus, or of Jesus himself. They have mixed Jesus and the loving creator in with the two-headed God of the Jews and lost the true understanding of what he was teaching, as Jesus predicted they would if they did that. A very serious and damaging mistake. Then they teach this same lie to other children. Yahweh 1, war god of fire. The Egyptians also worshipped a few different war gods, all violent killers. Sekhmet was one of their war gods, known for her fierce and destructive nature. A powerful warrior who wields divine retribution. She led them into warfare, was violent, vicious and bloodthirsty, and could breathe fire against her enemies. They also made offerings of the blood out of animals, food, drink, music and incense to her to gain her favour. The same stuff, sacrifice animals, war god, let's go and kill and murder. Make a strong war god to kill and murder and steal. In the Old Wine Testament, and this one can give fire, breathe fire, which is interesting. In the Old Wine Testament, we see in 2 Kings 1:10, where the Jewish prophet Elijah calls fire to come down from the heaven of Yahweh 1, the God of war and death, to incinerate 2 captains and their 50 soldiers, and the war god of death does it for Elijah. So here's this Jewish guy calling fire to come down from heaven to incinerate these other people. There's the Egyptian war god. What does she do? Breathes fire to kill anyone that they want to kill, sort of thing. It's the same God. Sekhmet is Yahweh 1, the war god. In another example, we see the Jewish war god mercilessly incinerate 2 children for offending him by offering the wrong incense to him in Leviticus 10. Now, Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, take their respective fire pans, and after putting fire in them, placed incense on it and offered strange fire before the Lord, Yahweh 1, war god, which he had not commanded them to do. And fire came out from the presence of the Lord, war god 1, and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. That's like saying, you brought me a peanut butter sandwich, I wanted an egg sandwich. Boom, incinerate you. I mean, that's how ridiculous that is. That's not anything to do with Jesus. That's nothing to do with Jesus or the divine loving spiritual life force that empowers your spiritual life. That's only love. This is a war god, brutal, revengeful, murdering, thieving, lying. The Egyptian god of war Sekhmet, who could breathe fire on her enemies, and the Jewish god of war Yahweh 1, who does the same thing, is the same god of war and death, under different names. When the disciples of Jesus wanted to invoke this fire of their Yahweh 1 war god to incinerate the Samaritans who had insulted Jesus, he rebuked them severely, saying they had no idea who our spiritual creator really is. We've got that case where the Samaritans His own disciples wanted to call fire down from heaven. Jesus just told them off, big time. They were still worshipping the Jewish war god, you see. There are many such examples throughout the Jewish religion of this war god Yahweh One. They are clearly not referring to the presence of Jesus or our loving spiritual creator, and their perfect love and compassion being manifested in such a violent, murdering war god as these few examples show. Yet Judeo-Christian churches wrongly teach children this war god Yahweh One is the same spiritual father of Jesus, the Prince of Peace and Love. Total slander, and it must be stopped right now. Stop poisoning the spiritual way of love for followers of Jesus by joining him with the war god of the Jews, Yahweh One, and set Jesus free. Jesus condemns this Jewish Godhead of war as being Satan in disguise when he tells the Jews who worship this Godhead of war on the body of Yahweh in John 8:44, "You are children of your father the devil, and you love to carry out your father's lustful desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not standing in the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks from himself, for he is a deceiver and the father of lies." Jesus knew the Jewish religion was dualistic, worshipping a satanic war god and an opposing God of love and peace, a distortion of the one true loving creator, and he tried to bring the Jews out of it, but they did not want to let go of their satanic war god Yahweh One, and still don't. That way the Jews can oscillate between the two whenever they feel like it by calling them both by the same name Yahweh, and cover their own evil in the name of their distorted two-headed God Yahweh of war and love, murdering and stealing one day, then loving and caring the next, all in the name of their two-headed God Yahweh. A very contrived and convenient distortion. Jews stone to death anyone who criticised their two-headed God Yahweh. Is it any wonder they murdered Jesus, who attacked their false, distorted two-headed God so openly, like no one else before him, by calling the God of Yahweh One Satan, to destroy the evil hold it had on the Jewish people? There are plenty of examples of their war god. Same as Mars, same as the Greek Ares, same as Sekhmet. It's the same war god, filthy, murdering war god. Same God, Yahweh One. Now Yahweh Two, there's another Yahweh there. See, that's the problem. That's the deception. That's the cunning sort of evil, really. Yahweh Two, the God of love and peace. The Roman god of peace was called Pax. She was a god that was worshipped at her temples to bring an end to wars and provide successful pacts of peace with adversaries. Emperor Augustus also popularized her to help bring peace to the Roman Empire. Around the 4th to 5th century, as she declined in popularity, the Christian faith based on Jesus took over her role as the symbol and power of peace and non-violence, until it was corrupted by early church leaders misleading Christians to go back to worshipping the two-headed Yahweh, God of the Jews, instead of the one true loving spiritual creator of Jesus. The Jews had some love and peace instructions from Yahweh to Godhead of limited love. In Leviticus 19:18, it says, from Yahweh to the loving God, the loving Yahweh, the Godhead of love, the other Yahweh. There's two Yahwehs. You've got to remember that. There's two different gods there. So this is the good God. You shall not take vengeance, nor bear any grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbour as yourself. This was an exclusive practice only for Jews between Jews. But later in Leviticus 19:34, we see a glimpse of a universal spiritual way of love that Jesus taught. The God of love, Yahweh too, says, "The foreigner who resides amongst you shall be to you as a native among you, and you shall love him as yourself." That would be the equivalent of saying today that all Jews should treat Palestinians as Jews and love them as they love other Jews. Well, that's a joke, isn't it? Today, only a very small group of Jews are capable of this higher spiritual understanding and practice of light and love, and I bless those good Jews who stand against the Israeli government and what they're doing. The Yahweh 2 God of love and peace is seen in Jeremiah 29:11. The God of love said, "I know the plans I have for you, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope." In Nehemiah 9:17, "You are a God of forgiveness, gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in loving kindness, and you do not forsake us." Can you see the difference between the war God and this God? There are two different gods. In Psalms 34:14, we see the God of love again saying, Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. That's the temple of the loving God, but the temple of the loving God is in the temple of the war God, and they're both called Yahweh. Do you get it? It's quite simple. It's just a lie. In Isaiah 54:10, for the mountains may depart and the hills be removed, but my steadfast love shall not depart from you, and my covenant of peace shall not be removed, says the Lord Yahweh too of love, who has compassion on you. In Nahum 1:7, the Lord Yahweh too of love is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and knows those who take refuge with him. Now, that God is not the war God. Go and kill everyone, steal everything, and steal the land, and murder little kiddies as well. This is a different God. The other one's hate, murder, kill, steal. This one's love, forgive, be compassionate. It's a different God. And the Jewish Christian churches are lying. And that's the thing that really angers me. I was born into the Catholic Church and I left it because of this filthy lie. They must stop teaching this to Christians. Cut the Bible, as I say to children, look, I cut the Bible into two. There's two separate bits. There's the Jewish religions here. You know, it's the New Testament without the book of Revelations. That's all you have to read are his words. They're two different religions. Cut the Bible in two. These are some of the gold nuggets of love Jesus found amongst the dualistic two-headed God Yahweh of love and war that reflect the presence of a God of love. Jesus put all the gold nuggets together and formed a solid gold disc of pure love and non-violence. This led him out of the perverted and divided understanding of the two-headed God of the Jews, rejecting and condemning the evil Yahweh one God of war of the Jewish religion. As Jesus said, if your eye or mind is single, your whole body will be filled with spiritual light and love. But if you are divided within, you will be full of darkness. You can't worship a war God and a God of love at the same time and say it's the one God. You're divided. You're full of darkness. You mix black and white together. What do you got? At best you got grey, not white. He tried to lead the Jews out also, but instead of following him out of the God of war, Yahweh one, into the loving spiritual creator of universal love, they murdered him, which is what all children who worship war gods do. The Jews were also trying to trap Jesus into blaspheming their two-headed God Yahweh, to stone Jesus to death because he was constantly attacking their Godhead of war through his revolutionary spiritual way of love and non-violence and understanding of the one true divine loving spiritual creator. That is why he often spoke in parables and not openly about the corrupt two-headed God of the Jews. Anyone who offends a war god is killed by that war god and its followers. Even little egotistical human war gods like Hitler or Putin will kill those who oppose them, for they are shadow figures, beasts of the flesh, children of war and death, worshippers of the liar and murderer Satan. This is why Christians must never call Yahweh the loving spiritual creator of Jesus, because there are two different Yahwehs, and only the Yahweh of love and peace has anything to do with Jesus. This is also why Jesus could never refer to our loving spiritual creator as Yahweh in the Gospels, as that would be misleading his followers. But the Judeo-Christian churches nearly all do it today. I don't know of any that don't. I do it. I don't do it. Because I'm a follower of Jesus, so I can't do it because that's the wrong God. Jesus taught, our loving creator is a spirit, and we must come to her in spirit and in truth. Our loving creator's entire being and consciousness is only love, and for us to be her spiritual children, we must become at one only with her love. To describe her as being anything else would be a lie, distortion, and slander. Jesus gave this correct description of the one true spiritual loving creator he was a child of when he taught, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, for our loving creator's love is like the sun that rises on the evil and on the good. Her love is like the rain that falls on the just and the unjust. She is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. If your love is not perfect as her love, you will not enter the heavenly spiritual world as her spiritual child of love. That's what it's all about. There's another world, another dimension of spiritual. You've got a spiritual body with you, you can't see it, but that doesn't mean it's not with you. Get into it. Become at one with it by adopting the characteristics that Jesus talks about to awaken it. That's what it's all about. before your body of flesh dies, which it will. Goes back to the earth. Feed it to the vultures. That's all he says it's worth. Does this description given by Jesus himself match the Jewish Yahweh one, God of war and death? The God is not that God. That God is not the loving spiritual creator of Jesus, who never hurts or kills any of her children, even when they are evil. To deny this statement of Jesus and slander him and our loving creator by saying this is the same Yahweh one war God of the Jews is to deny the one true loving creator of Jesus and all that Jesus taught about her. Do you see what's happened? It's so cunning that without knowing it, Jewish Christian children are actually slandering the true loving, beautiful creator of love and Jesus by linking them into being Yahweh. And Jesus is a son of Yahweh, who sometimes murders and kills and slaughters for no apparent reason, except to steal. True Christians know they are very different gods because they are not Jewish. I'm not Jewish. While all Judeo-Christians say they are the same God because they have mixed the new wine understanding of our loving spiritual creator in with the old wine two-headed distorted God of the Jews, which Jesus told them not to do. The Jewish religion is a seriously divided religion and should never be mixed in with the pure spiritual teachings of Jesus and our loving spiritual creator. Darkness cannot exist where there is only light and truth. Jesus warned his followers, no man tears a piece of cloth off a new garment and sews it onto an old garment. The new does not match the old, and it will lift off, and the schism between the two will be made worse. If anyone tries to mix the old into the new, they will make the things more confusing for themselves, creating a dualistic labyrinth they can never escape from, and a distorted understanding of our loving spiritual creator. Children today are too smart and independent to swallow the lie that the two-headed God of the Jews in the Old Testament is the one living spiritual creator of Jesus, so they stay away. It is for them that I wanted to write this book, so they do not throw Jesus and his beautiful life-changing spiritual way and teachings out with the two-headed God of the Jews and the Judeo-Christian church organizations. In general, the Jews were no different from other warring nations at the time. They sacrificed animals to their two-headed Yahweh, God of war and love, and took symbols of their Godhead of war with them when they went to war to kill and murder other children. They prayed to their Yahweh war God that he will help them to slaughter their enemies so they can steal their lands and plunder them of their riches, the same as all war God worshippers do. No different. But when war and murdering was all over, they prayed to the Yahweh Godhead of love to help them love one another, the same as all worshippers of a loving creator do. It is a two-faced God and not the one true spiritual loving creator of the true spiritual life that Jesus was at one with. He helps us to be at one with her love by following his spiritual way of love and listening to his words, becoming transformed by them to be spiritually awakened or be born again from above, as Jesus would say. Jesus instructed his disciples and us to heal the sick and bring those dead to their spirit back to life. All true followers of Jesus should only believe in the one true loving spiritual creator and come alive in spirit as her children of love on earth to bring her healing love to all and bring peace on earth. Despite this, many good-hearted Judeo-Christian children have still found the loving creator through the teachings of Jesus and understand that she and Jesus are spiritual love, non-violence and forgiveness, and have made their way to the heavenly spiritual world by just following the way of love of Jesus. That is because they generally completely ignore the Old Testament Jewish religion and the evil book of Revelation. They just ignore it. So they can get through the labyrinth by just ignoring it. It can happen, but it's no good having that evil hanging around. It's like I say to people, don't go swimming in that Jewish billabong. There's a deadly snake in it, poisonous snake. Don't swim in that billabong. Stay in this beautiful, clear, crystal stream that Jesus gave you, the living water stream of love. So, I, however, will gladly speak out about the distorted two-headed God of the Jews to help all children come out of this deluded distortion and find the one true divine loving creator of their spiritual life. I've had to write about this to defend Jesus and our loving spiritual creator from the slander and misleading poisonous words concerning them that are taught by many Judeo-Christians. I hope my simple, clear understanding of Jesus and our loving spiritual creator frees many of the children from the distortion and confusion caused by mixing two different gods and two different spiritual teachings together, but calling them one and the same. A never-ending conundrum, labyrinth and maze that leaves you divided within yourself, living in a dualistic state of existence, instead of your I being single and your body full of light and love for everyone. As Jesus said, we should all be as true spiritual children of our loving Creator. It is extremely important that every Christian cut the Bible in two and separate yourself and Jesus from the Jewish religion and rip out the book of Revelation and burn it. Put the Old Testament Jewish religion with a different two-headed God that is poisoning the New Testament understanding that Jesus gave of our loving spiritual Creator up on the shelf with other religions, other religious books. There is usually some love in all religions. Our loving spiritual Creator is only love. Jesus is only love. She has always only been love and always will only be love. She only heals, saves and gives eternal spiritual life to all children who wish to accept it, and she never gives death, for she is the true source of real spiritual life. And to become her spiritual children in the heavenly spiritual world, we must be filled only with her love. I mean, it's pretty simple when you think about it. In this dangerous world, I've got to become a pacifist of love, peace and non-violence, and yet stand up strongly against evil, but not become evil. That's the trick. That's all there is to Jesus' teachings, really. But it's extraordinarily powerful, and you've got to overcome the fear of the death of the body of the flesh. And you've got to believe in a heavenly spiritual world, and that's part of the problem there. That's being destroyed as well, isn't it? the materialist, atheistic, scientific community. All war gods are gods of death, murder, thieving and destruction with a twofold effect. Firstly, those who worship their evil war god go and kill other children in battle, destroying their lives and robbing them. But they can never kill a child's spiritual body and soul, created by our loving spiritual Creator. Secondly, while doing this and deluding themselves into thinking they are as powerful as a war god by murdering other children without consequences, they are actually destroying their own spiritual life and soul, which are only empowered by the loving life force of our loving Creator. All soldiers of war do this to themselves. Jesus taught, "He who lives by the sword shall perish by the sword." The Bible is one wineskin and contains the old Jewish dualistic wine and the new singularity of love wine of Jesus, and they should never have been placed in the same wineskin, as Jesus himself warned. A two-headed God can never be a single, loving, spiritual Creator. It is just that simple. Wake up, get over it, and come spiritually alive through the way of Jesus of universal love, non-violence, and forgiveness. I only have to refer to the Jewish two-headed God and the spiritual words of Jesus himself to show this truth. It is not just my opinion. Please investigate this for yourself and draw your own conclusions. If you believe I am wrong, then show me by having a sound, intelligent, spiritual reason based on Jesus and his words, not the Jewish old wine religion. Blind faith is dangerous without a logical and intelligent spiritual base. It has been very important to me to spend time explaining this tragic 1700 years lie and distortion. I do not like Judeo-Christians slandering my lifelong friend Jesus and spiritual teacher of the way of love and non-violence that will hopefully lead me and everyone who follows his way to the heavenly spiritual world beyond death. And I do not like anyone who calls my spiritual loving Creator a murdering, thieving war god, leading children astray to worship the distorted, two-headed God of the Jews in the name of Jesus. Stop doing it. Love, forgiveness, compassion, non-violence and equanimity are the cornerstones of the spiritual way of love that Jesus taught that will lead us to the heavenly spiritual world. And although we cannot see it with our eyes of the flesh, it is as real as this material world, but spiritual. We have to feel it within ourselves before we can see it. Which means you have to become at one with love, don't you, to feel it. Even love your enemy. God is love. Love is life. God is love. Love is true life. Become at one with love. Well, that's my fairly strong, forthright discourse on the fact and the truth that the Jewish religion is dualistic. They worship two different gods, a war god and a god of peace and love, exactly the same as the Romans, exactly the same as the Greeks and everyone at that time. But unlike everyone else who was honest and had a different temple for each god, different opposing forces, the Jews came up with the cunning, devious idea to call their stinking, filthy, murdering, thieving war god, which they all were, Mars, Ares, all the same, Sekhmet, they called that god Yahweh. And I know, let's call our God of love Yahweh too. That'll be very good for us. That'll get rid of our conscience. Great. No, very dangerous. And they still haven't gotten rid of it. That's why Jesus left the Jewish religion. And that's what he tried to do, bring them out of it as well. But that's their business. If they want to stay in that, that's their problem. But Jewish Christians need to cut the word Jewish, Judeo, right out of your life. Cut the Jewish religion away from the Bible. Cut the Bible into the two different religions that it is, with two different gods that it is. Rip out the book of Revelation and burn it, or stick it in the book of Daniel if you want to, because that's all it is. It's just put there to slander Jesus and the loving Creator. And to take you back, it's a big detour sign in the book of Revelation. Detour, go back to worship Yahweh, the two-headed God, at the end of the Gospels, after Jesus tells you she's only love, she loves the enemy, she loves everyone, she loves, loves, love. Then at the end they put in Revelations, God's coming on, and Jesus is coming on the clouds to cause wars and famine and death and throw people into hell. That's the war God, don't you get it? They've set it up to destroy Christians' understanding of who God really is. An apocalyptic Jew did that for sure. Well, you don't fool me, and you don't fool some other children who've got at least half a brain. But you sure are fooling a lot of other people, a lot of children. No wonder they don't go to the Jewish Christian churches anymore. I don't blame them. And yet all the Jewish Christian churches tend to have charities. Wonderful outreach charities for the poor, the homeless, the needy. Beautiful, fantastic, wonderful. That's Jesus and the loving Creator. Correct, that's true. Don't start saying, oh, and Jesus is coming back in the clouds too with God, and Jesus is going to open these seals and cause plagues and famines and wars and sores on children's bodies. I talk about that book. That chapter is a beautiful chapter. I love it. The Revelation Ruse, I call it. That's just stinking slander. Anyone can see that who hasn't been brainwashed. And there's the problem. If you want to stop being brainwashed, stop reading the Jewish religion, rip out the book of Revelation and just read Jesus' words. Do that for about 10 years. Buddha's teachings are beautiful too. Read them as well, because he's all about cleaning out your mind of adventitious negativities. Exactly what Jesus said to do. The dirt's inside the cup, inside your mind, he's saying. You've got to clean the dirt out of your mind. Exactly the same thing Buddha taught. They both were singular. They treated everyone the same. They were both pacifists originally. So there you go. I'm happy to talk about this because it's the truth. And I don't like people slandering Jesus or the loving spiritual creator of heaven or heaven. So I got a bit upset. I never bothered about it until I started reinvestigating it and wondering why has this all gone wrong? And then heaven, I was sitting by the river one day here in Melbourne, and I used to ask people as they walk by down by the river, what do you think about all this beautiful nature around us? Do you think it's like a Big Bang Theory, or do you think there's maybe some other spiritual force behind it? I was always fishing to find anyone who's interested in spiritual thinking. And I met this lovely couple, Tom and his wife, elderly. You could see just by his persona, he was a beautiful, conservative, lovely person, a really good man, his wife. Anyway, he was in the Catholic Church, and yep, I told him I was too, but I left, etc., etc. And I didn't mention anything about the two-headed God to him, you know. And one day he was there walking along by himself. I said, Tom, I had a question for you. And I'd been sitting there thinking, I'd literally been talking to the loving Creator and Jesus saying, look, I can see what's gone wrong. I had a look at this. I had a look at the Greek interlinear Gospels, and I realised they were mistranslating those. And I visited these Jewish Christian churches where they just banged on and on about the Jewish religion and Revelation, never mentioned Jesus' words. I just thought, blimey, this is all wrong. I could write about this. I don't know if I could do it, but I'll try. I thought, but should I do it? I don't know. It's sort of like they won't like what I'm going to say. And Tom comes along, and I said, Tom, how's it going? Fine, thanks, Chris. You know. I said, tell me, Tom, I've got a question for you. He was about 10 years older than me, so he was in his 70s or something, early 80s maybe. I said, you've seen the decline of the Catholic Church, as I have myself, as I've witnessed it too. The church is shutting down. Young people aren't going. It's just they're emptying. I said, Tom, why do you think that's happening? He looked at me. And I thought, oh, he's going to say, you know, children are more interested in modern things and there's gambling and there's entertainment. They're just not interested in religion anymore. I thought he'd say something like that. But you know what he said to me? He just said 3 words. Why are they leaving the churches, Tom, the Jewish, Christian, Catholic churches? He said, the Old Testament. Oh boy, that was straight out of heaven. That was a sign from heaven through this beautiful man I met, who I could see he had led a really clean, good life. He was just irradiated goodness. As soon as this more elderly, conservative man said that to me, I went, right, I'm going to write about this. He wouldn't do it because he's traditionally in that church and he wouldn't do this, what I'm doing. It'll be a bit, you know, a bit much to take on. But I can do it because I've never bothered about anything about Jewish stuff. So that was the sign I got from heaven, from Tom, by the river. And there was no way known I was going to even, in any way, would I think he'd say anything like that at all. But that's what he said, just 3 words. And then I went, wow. I agree with you, Tom. And that day I went home from the river and I started organising, you know, the translations for the Gospels and getting the interlinear Greeks up and all that sort of business, and finally got the book published. To get to, at least I knew I had to start with the Gospels to correct them first, and then I'd go on to explain about, you know, the problems and the lies about Jesus and the slander, which is the second book. So it's taken me about 3 years really, because I'm fighting this damn bloody fungal infection, which is trying to knock me out, because Satan goes, quick, stop him. He knows the truth about me. He knows I'm in the Christian religions as Yahweh, one. But bad luck, Satan. The 2 books are already up and sort of running, more or less. But so there you go. Yeah, the story about old Tom. He was the green light, you know. He was such a beautiful gift from heaven, that man. And it's been really quirky. I've had a lot of signs like that. And I was pondering whether I should do it or not. I was literally sitting there by the river. Should I do this? Am I capable of doing this? Can I do this? I've got to look at all the Greek interlinears. I mean, what about all the great priests and popes and theologians and cardinals and stuff? How am I going to write anything that matches that? Tom gave me the green light. Do it. And the thing was, the loving spiritual creator and Jesus was simply saying to me, Chris, you know we're love and non-violence. You've always known that. You've never been poisoned by the Jewish religion. You're the one who has to do it. I'm a bit like the fishermen by the sea. Jesus didn't go and teach the scribes and Pharisees and try to convince them. They were too brainwashed. He went to the simple fishermen. He knew they might be able to get it. It took them a few years to get it, but he had a better chance with just simple, ordinary folk. I'm just a gardener. There you go. So if I can do it, you can do it. You can see the logic in this. Just think for yourself. It makes sense. It's logical. If it can't stand up by itself, my father was an engineer, really clear-minded, and he'd smash anything or anyone to pieces if they had an illogical argument. He'd just smash them to pieces. He had a really sharp mind, really clear engineering mind. So although my dialogues maybe not be beautifully written and all those sorts of things, and it may not have a lot of technical stuff about the theology of the Greek or Jewish religion or whatever, the fact is, I can just use Jesus' words to point out the problems and the lies that are elsewhere in the Bible and put onto him, put onto the loving creator, because it's just quite obvious. His words do not match the two-headed God of the Jews, particularly the war God. They do match the loving God of the Jews, which is limited, but they certainly have nothing to do with the war God. But the Judeo-Christian churches are still teaching that stinking, murdering, thieving war god, genocidal at Jericho, is the God of Jesus. And I've been in churches here in Melbourne where they actually teach that today. They inspired me, these children. May they be filled with the love of our loving Creator and stop teaching that rubbish. Okay, well that's the end of that chapter. Bye for now.